E aí, gostaram dos lefis que vocês tomaram ali em cima? O que vocês acharam? Estavam bons os drinks? Ótimo, ótimo. Gente, é um prazer muito grande ter vocês aqui. Eu queria realmente agradecer a presença de todo mundo e agradecer também a força da equipe toda aqui do Fasano que está recebendo a gente. Mais tarde eles vão fazer mais alguns coquetéis pra gente ali em cima. É uma oportunidade muito legal que a gente tem de trazer o Joe aqui pro Brasil. Ele que é reconhecido como um dos melhores mixologistas do mundo, está cotado para ser o melhor brand ambassador do mundo pelo Tales of the Cocktail, dentre os 10. E é um cara que entende muito, muito, não só de Grey Goose, mas de vodka, de coquetelaria. E eu queria que vocês podem ficar à vontade para fazer perguntas, só levantar a mão e aí a gente espera chegar o microfone. E aí vocês podem fazer pergunta em português, eles vão traduzir para o Joe, tá? Eu espero que vocês curtam bastante. É um encontro bem informal, é bem tranquilo, então podem se sentir em casa. E sem demorar demais, eu vou apresentar para vocês o Joe McCanta, o embaixador global da Grey Goose. Joe.
Cool, thank you. Hello. Thank you, Tony, as well. Appreciate it. So we've got a translator too, so it might be easier with your headphones on. But I wanted to say first off, welcome. And actually, I really want to say thank you to you guys, because for me, I travel the world, and my favorite thing that I get to do is trainings like this. I actually get a lot out of it, because it gives me an opportunity to talk about Grey Goose and what I love about Grey Goose, but also to hear your questions. I hopefully answer any of your questions. So today, anything that you have ever wanted to know about Grey Goose, now is the time to ask it, okay? Okay. So, and I also wanted to say it's a pleasure to be back in Rio, because Rio is a really special place. For me, I grew up actually, before I was a bartender, I was a musician, playing piano. And you can't be in a better place than Rio for music, and for the love of music, the love of life, and the love of food. This is a really special city, so I'm sure you guys all know that. And most of all, thank you for actually coming inside on a day like today to listen to me.
Okay.
We'll get out to the beach soon enough, I'm sure. So, hopefully you enjoyed the drinks upstairs, and I'd like to thank the amazing Fasano bar staff for doing a great job. That cocktail we were serving you is one of my creations called the Grey Goose, the Fizz. And I do the cocktails for all the big events for Grey Goose around the world. And that was a cocktail we created maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And you know, I'd make we'd be doing the cocktails at the Academy Awards, and I would try to think of these really creative, amazing drinks. And no matter what happened, people would show up in their nice dresses and gowns, and all they wanted was champagne, champagne, champagne. So I was like, I'm gonna make a cocktail that looks like champagne, tastes like champagne, but it's not champagne, it has Grey Goose in it. And that's the Fizz. So it's a really simple drink. Grey Goose, vodka, Saint-Germain elderflower liqueur, fresh lime, and soda, and that's it. And it's a really nice one, so hopefully you enjoyed that, and thank you to the guys again. So we're going to talk about Grey Goose today. You know, you can make vodka from anything with sugar in it can be made into a vodka. And in many ways, that's why vodka is the heart. It's the foundation of all spirits. Because if you make, let's say, a wheat vodka and you age it for a bit, and you happen to do this in Scotland, you have a scotch, right? You could make a grape-based vodka and age it as well, and that would be a cognac. Arguably, and my colleagues, Raj Nagra, if any of you know, he's the global ambassador for Bombay Sapphire. He hates it when I say what I'm about to say, but gin is just a juniper-flavored vodka, right? So, it's all about understanding what makes a vodka different from one another, and especially on your back bar, what makes you realize what is the best vodka for making a cocktail suited to your guest's taste. Grey Goose, we are 100% wheat vodka. And our wheat comes from a very special place in the north of Paris. It's a region which we'll talk about a lot today called Picardy. Picardy is it's the place where the finest French chefs source the wheat to bake their breads. So you all notice that you've got actually very nice bread here in Brazil. Everywhere we've gone, I've had great bread, so you guys understand. But, you know, when you smell that sweetness that you get from a French baguette, really nice French sweetness, that's kind of what we were looking for capturing when we decided to use French wheat. The other thing that we use is water, and as you probably know, any bottle of vodka, if it says 40% ABV, 60% of the bottle is water. So water is very important, especially for vodka. Ours comes from the region of Jansac in Cognac, and we'll talk about all these today. But just 2 ingredients. But what's very important is to understand the mindset that you approach those ingredients with. And for us, the mindset starts really with 2 people. One, this gentleman here. Does anyone know who this is? Yeah. Some people think it's my grandfather. I wish it was my grandfather because I would be a very rich man. But no, this is Sidney Frank. He's an American who is a bit of a legend in the spirits world. He's was very well known for importing the fine, really fine cognacs and armagnacs of France to America. And it was in the mid-90s that he looked to vodka and he said, well, how come the only vodkas that are out there in the mid-90s were all very, very, they were about neutrality. They were very neutral, okay? And they were based around 2 concepts. One is, how many times do you distill a vodka? And the other thing was how many times you filter it and what you filter it through. And he had an idea that maybe vodka could be made in a different way, and he looked to the cognac for a process. And he said, maybe you could make a vodka the way that you make a fine cognac. If any of you know cognac or you work with it in your bar, you don't distill cognac over and over and over again. And you don't filter and filter and filter. Cognac's all about overseeing the whole process so that there's a lot of flavor in the final cognac. And so he had this idea, but he didn't know how to achieve it. So he reached out to a man who was making his cognacs. And that is our maître d'chai, whose name is François Thibault. François was born in Cognac. His parents are both wine growers. And he studied winemaking at the University of Bordeaux and at Burgundy before apprenticing to become what's called the maître d'chai. And a maître d'chai is it's the highest position in spirits making in France. In Scotland, again, I don't know why Scotch is on my mind today, but in Scotland, you've got a master blender and a master distiller, right? Even here, for cachaça, you usually have a master blender and a master distiller. And they're 2 different people. In France, master blender, master distiller is the same person, and that's the maître d'chai. So it's a very, very high up position. And they're responsible for overseeing everything about the making of the spirit. And that's what François, you can't go to school to become a maître d'chai. The only way you can learn is through apprenticing with another maître d'chai. And this is why cognac is all about tradition. So François worked for the house of H. Mounier, which is a very fine cognac house, doing small batch cognacs for Sidney Frank. And when, in the mid-90s, Sidney asked François if he would think about making a vodka. And François said yes. I mean, he has, the way he says it is, he said, look, learning to make a vodka once you've made only cognac, it's like learning to play a different instrument if you're a musician. You know, if you understand the notes and you understand the general theory, then you can apply that same mindset to any spirit. But what he wanted to do was oversee the whole entire process from start to finish himself. So selecting the ingredient, which he selected the wheat, he wanted to make sure that he could create new processes that would allow a bit of a different profile flavor to come through in vodka. And most importantly, he wanted to use only the best ingredients he could find. And he said those three things to Sydney, and they agreed to it, and that's when Grey Goose was founded right then. That was the moment where Grey Goose all took shape. So, and I'll talk about the fine ingredients now. So like I said, we use a wheat. It's in France, they classify their wheat just the same way that they classify their wines. You know, wines are classified with, and we only use the highest class of wheat. It's called blé Diable supérieur, or superior bread-making wheat. This region here, which is called Picardy. And Picardy is in the north of Paris. It's a region where they never actually water the wheat, they only depend on rainfall. And it's an area that has a very, very particular type of soil that makes for a really sweet and very, very rich style of wheat. And as I said, that's the only wheat that you're allowed to put in, the top bakers are allowed to use for making a croissant or baguettes of France. And if you were to look in the soil of Picardy, it's particular as well, because you remember when I said they just depend on rainfall every year? In the soil, you've got these little white pieces, and these are chalk. And this chalk is very important because it acts like a sponge. So when it rains, it absorbs water. When it becomes dry, it allows moisture to go back into the soil. And that means that the soil has a very rich microorganism life inside of it that makes for what we call in France terroir. You've heard the word terroir probably with wine before. Terroir means the taste of the land in either grapes or food. It's tasting that land. And there's a very interesting type of clay and limestone soil. The clay and sand in the soil underneath allows for air to flow freely underneath the roots. But as I said, the chalk holds in moisture, so it's a really interesting type of soil. And for us, that's probably the most important side of things. I think this thing, I think it's out of battery, but that's fine. I can just, cool. Sorry. The other thing is you've got farmers that have been farming in this region of Picardy for many generations. All of the wheat that we use to make Grey Goose comes from just 3 farming cooperatives. And the cooperatives are, this is actually one of our farmers, his name's Marc. He's the 11th generation of farmers farming his land for wheat. And very much they use this same kind of mentality that they've been using for years. I guess it's back to normal. It's your magic touch, Tony. Yeah. And they use things like crop rotation. So they plant different crops from year to year. And it's about looking after the land and looking after, as well, the people that produce the wheat. And we're very proud that the exact farmers are actually partners in the Grey Goose distillery. So they're farming our wheat, but they're also part of the overall process of making the vodka. And our distillery is located right in Picardy, in the wheat fields of Picardy. So that's where, because that's where the wheat comes from, we wanted to be close to the farmers and close to the wheat. At the end of July, every year, sometimes early August, you end up in a 1-3-week period harvesting all of the wheat for the year. It happens just once a year. And the wheat goes into what's called a silo, a big temperature and humidity controlled silo. And that's where it sits for the rest of the year until we're ready to make Grey Goose with it. Any questions so far? One other quick thing I'll tell you is our wheat is called winter wheat. You've got 2 main kinds of wheat. You can plant wheat in the spring and harvest in the summer, or you can go and plant before the winter and harvest in the summer. Winter wheat's planted in the winter, so it has 3 months longer in the ground to interact with the soil. Spring wheat is planted in only 6 months, so spring, harvested summer, and you usually find spring wheat places like Eastern Europe and Russia where it's very, very cold because they can't plant before the winter. We're just using this, which is called a winter wheat, BPS. All right? So, we'll get into what we do with that wheat, and I like to use the analogy of coffee. And I'm in a room full of bartenders, so for a free bottle of Grey Goose, can someone tell me how you'd make great coffee at your bar? A great espresso, let's say. Anyone? Freshly ground, exactly. And what else? Great water? Freshly brewed, exactly. And the water, yes. And anything else? And the climate has to be perfect for the coffee, exactly, exactly.
Grão de boa qualidade.
A grain, yes, exactly, the whole grain, perfect. And the only last thing, you need to keep the beans totally airtight before you grind them. You can't let the beans touch air, right? Because they get too dry and they're not fresh. So it's what everyone was saying. I would break it down as this. One, you have to use great ingredients. The coffee has to be awesome, like the great coffee that you have in Brazil, some of the best in the world. The water has to be great. So that's one thing, great ingredients. Two, you need to grind it fresh. And it has to be ground right before you brew. Three, how you set up your instruments, the temperature, the water, the grind, all of that needs to be precise, perfectly precise. And this, my friends, I think, is how you make great vodka as well. We've already talked about sourcing the best ingredients, so we use only the top wheat and the best water we can find. But two, we grind our own flour, and we do that in these, which are flour mills that are located right in the distillery. And to my knowledge, we're the only vodka doing this. And what that means is we can, just like making coffee, you grind your flour, because this is what the wheat looks like, you know? And you need to break that down into flour, and the moment it gets ground, it goes into fermentation. So that it's all about very quick way. And this, the precision of your equipment, that starts with these, because Francois has calibrated the 4 flour mills so that when the wheat goes in, the granularity becomes, I don't know what's happening now. I'm very bad with technology. I don't know if you know that. I'm great with vodka, bad with technology. A flour that's only ever made for Grey Goose. It's not made for any other purpose but for making Grey Goose. The majority of vodka producers are using flour that comes from the food industry, okay? Or some vodka producers that you know are actually buying a neutral grain spirit. So they're buying something already distilled and re-rectifying it. But for us, we create our own flour every single time. Does that make sense? Okay. After we grind our flour, we have to break down, because inside the flour you've got what's called very complex sugars. And what we need to do is convert those sugars into a simple form of sugar. And that happens through 2 processes, one called liquefaction, the other is called saccharification. Okay? Liquefaction is adding in warm water to the flour to create a paste. And saccharification, we add in 2 separate enzymes. Okay? The first enzyme is what's called alpha amylase. And it happens at a warmer temperature, and it starts breaking down some of the complex sugars into simpler strains of sugar. Fermentation. Our fermentation takes place in a 6-step cascade system. And I'll talk you through that in a moment. Hopefully we get the computer back up and running. It ran out of power. In the meantime, are there any questions about what I've talked about so far? Yes?
Yeah. So you say that wheat?
Do you, hang on one second, because then she'll translate your question so everyone, or you can just say it in Portuguese if you'd like, and I'll listen. Yes, I can hear you.
Você em português?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, it's easier.
Então você diz que o trigo fica guardado no silo,
Yes.
esperar para ele ser moído. Ele é moído antes de ser feito a liquefação e liquefação.
Exactly.
Ele é moído na hora, vamos dizer assim. Freshly ground to make the...
Exactly. In fact, I'll show you. It's probably worthwhile waiting, and I'm going to show you exactly how that happens. I just went ahead because the computer wasn't working, and I was just like, I'm going to talk about this, but I'll show you in a second. Yes, exactly. So we use...
É como bom café. Ele é feito na hora.
It's just like coffee. Exactly. So the full wheat grain arrives at the distillery, and it's checked for humidity levels, and only then do we grind it, and the grinding happens directly next to fermentation. So it all happens in one quick run. Good question. Yeah, please. Any other questions? Maybe back here. Just one moment, just so the translator. Sorry.
Então, mais ou menos o que se faz com o grão é muito parecido com o que se faz com a cerveja.
Yes, exactly. In spirits production, you don't call it a beer. It's put. And he was like, huh? Nothing is added to Grey Goose.
Só para finalizar, qual levedura saberia me informar qual o nome científico dela, ou pelo menos a classificação dentro, para estudo, curiosidade mesmo?
Yes, it's a very long name, but it's called Stachyomeiosis. I will write it out for you if it helps later. If I can spell it right. Sometimes I get it wrong. Okay, so I'm going to show you. This is the wheat actually arriving at the distillery, and it arrives whole, just like you just saw it. This is it, right here. A whole wheat grain. And then it goes into this machine, which shakes the whole wheat grains. And what happens is it shakes stones and other branches from the harvest are sucked down, and the wheat is sucked up, so that we separate the stones out with a vacuum, basically. I mean, with air. The stones are then deposited, and then the wheat goes into our flour mills. And it goes through the first one. If it's the right size, it goes straight to fermentation. However, just like when you wring out a cheesecloth, we want to press as much flavor as possible. So we then, if it's not the right size, it goes to a second, a third, and a fourth mill. And then what you're left with on this side is the outer casing of the wheat, the outside. And this, which is our Grey Goose flour. And it's the perfect flour for just making the taste of Grey Goose. So is that better now that you can see that? What was that? Sorry. Okay. From there, we go into liquefaction and saccharification, as I mentioned. And then we go into fermentation. So the glucose is ready for fermentation. Our fermentation takes place, as I said, in what's called a cascade system. So this is the pre-fermentation tank, where the glucose is released. That then goes into a tank, preparing it to be pushed through the cascade. From here, we put it into one of 6 interconnected tanks. And the reason we do that is to give us a bit more control over the fermentation process. Going back to what you were saying, my friend, about a beer. When you make beer, you only have one fermentation, right? Usually. And then what happens is you're left with everything afterwards. But it's harder to know how fast the yeast is acting if you just do one fermentation. So we put our yeast and our mash through these 6 connected containers. And each container, what happens is your alcohol level gets higher and higher, and the sugar, the glucose, goes down until you get to the final tank. And at this point, all of the sugar from the wheat has been eaten by the yeast. And you're left with a 10% ABV, as you said, beer, or bread wine, is what they call it in France. At this stage, we are ready to start distillation. Although I'll just show you, I believe it's here. Yes. These are the tanks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can see straight here, we start off with a very high glucose level, over 85%. But as the glucose is eaten, alcohol starts increasing. And this is your alcohol level. Okay? Glucose is going down, alcohol increases until it's all gone. Okay? Is that a little clearer? Yeah, the fermentation. From here, we get into distillation. And going back to your question, I like to think of us, in order by law to make a vodka, or to be called a vodka by the European Union law, you need to come at ABV. So, when vodka producers talk about using copper, and you know the ones, they're using it as a rectifier. They're using it to add, you know, character to a pre-distilled vodka. Just so everybody's clear on that. For us, I think of the vodka process, distillation-wise, as being finished when you achieve 96.2%. But some people count the amount of plates that are in the columns. Some people count the columns. For us, we just count the one process as one single process. Yes, sorry. I thought that was Tony, so I was looking at him. Sorry. Yes.
No caso, uma vodka destilada em...
Sorry, go for it again.
No caso, uma vodka destilada em barris de cobre, ela é acrescentada ainda na destilação, no caso da as de tanque simples também ou não?
So, did you understand? She's not quite...
Sim, sim.
Repete de novo pra gente, Johnny.
No caso, uma vodka destilada em barris de cobre, ela é redestilada de novo no processo como vocês fazem também ou não?
So when they're using copper, I can't speak for every vodka in the world, obviously, but most vodkas, when they talk about using copper, they're starting with a neutral grain spirit. It's NGS first, which has been made in a column still, and then they redistill it in copper, in a copper pot. Does that make sense?
Então é apenas um processo, no caso uma vodka processada em barris em cobre, ela é só apenas um processo acrescentado.
Exactly. So I mean, again, but usually what happens is it's already been distilled in a column, and then it's put through copper. So another process, another distillation. And it's great, and it changes the character of the vodka. But when I do training, sometimes people think copper pot still is all that they're using, and that cannot be true by law. Especially if you're making vodka in Europe. In fact, if you make a spirit, traditionally, there is a copper pot vodka. It's not called vodka, it's called Polignac. And that comes from Russia. But it's by law, it's not considered a vodka, it's called Polignac, which is a different form, it's a very ancient form of making spirit from Russia. And that comes out at a 70% ABV after the distillation in copper.
The reason why...
Yes, okay, go.
The reason why it only gets to 70% is some kind of limitation with the metal?
Yes, it's a limitation with two things. One, an alembic still has a fire underneath it, actual fire. You can only achieve a certain degree of heat by using an open flame. And alembic stills use an open flame. It's a big pot with an open flame underneath it. And then, so with a column still, you can use pressurized steam, and you can change the pressure inside the column. And when you change the pressure inside the column, you can heat things up or cool things down in a very different way, which you're going to see we use in our own way too. Clear? Clara? No. One more question. Sorry.
A temperatura do alambique, ele tem que ter trabalhado com a cachaça que tem sua proporção de temperatura para álcoois reais e não álcool contaminado?
Yes, it would be similar to making cachaça, and actually Tony, I mean, you probably can speak better to this, because the thing is, so many cachaças are made so differently. But the temperature for a real alcohol is different than a temperature for, exactly. Cool. Very good question.
I think they're going to see a lot of this in the video.
Yes, and now you're going to see some of this now.
vídeo que ele vai mostrar agora.
Okay, one more question.
E qual a temperatura correta, se for um alambique contínuo, né? Qual deveria se ter para ter o álcool exato para chegar a essa porcentagem de álcool puro, limpo?
It depends. It depends entirely on what you mean by clean alcohol. Meaning, no, what I mean by that, I know what your question is, but what I mean is, it's up to the distiller to decide how much pressure and what the temperature to pressure ratio is. And you can change, that's where you become a chef. There's not just one way to do it. You decide and you make those decisions.
It's part of the recipe.
And it is part of the recipe as a chef. Yeah. An interesting point on that, in the US, in the United States, the definition for vodka is called a taste still. It's called a tasteless, odorless spirit. In Europe, the definition is very different. In the EU, the definition says it's a spirit made from any fermentable sugar distilled in a way to selectively reduce the elements you don't want in the final vodka. And that's a very different mindset. One is, I want to achieve odorless, tasteless. The other is, I want to just take out the little things that get in the way of a nice spirit. Cool. From here, we go into our distillation. And our distillation takes place in 5 steps and 6 columns. The first step takes place in 2 identical columns, which are side by side. And the 10% ABV bread wine comes in to the column, and pressurized steam is introduced to work its way up these, which are called bubble plates. And the bubble plates are made from both copper and stainless steel. When you heat this beer up, or this wine, the first thing that evaporates is alcohol. And so the alcohol slowly works its way up through the copper and stainless steel plates until it comes to the top. And at the top, it's captured and it's concentrated with a cooling down process. And at this stage, it's at a 92% ABV. And it tastes quite remarkable, actually. It tastes a bit like a new make whiskey, like a very young. And it's still, though, to your point, it's still very harsh. There's certain elements, volatile aromatics, that don't taste very nice. So the next steps are all about removing the rest of those, but just selecting and removing the elements that you don't want in the final blend. The second step here is where it's called hydroselection. And hydroselection is adding water back in to the spirit. Water grabs onto certain families of bad aromas and helps to act as a way to select some of the high oils and low oils out of the spirit. From there, we go in, we split the spirit up. And a portion goes into a rectification with pressure. A pressure which happens at a very high heat. Another portion goes into a rectification with a vacuum, which happens in the exact opposite way, in a very low heat. What we do by splitting up the liquid, we're able to keep a bit more of the overall essence of both the top and the bottom of the liquid. If we were to use both pressure and then vacuum, you remove everything. But by splitting it up, we use two processes. And then we join the spirit back together in the fifth and final step here, which is called demethylization. Alcohol makes us happy. Methanol can blind you. But they live very close to each other. So the final step is removing all of the methanol. So what you're left with is the vodka. And at this stage, this is the first time it's a vodka, because it's at a 96.2% ABV. Okay? Questions? Yeah. It's a little scientific, I know, and especially at 3 o'clock on a sunny day. But I wanted to make sure you understand everything with our process. From here, the 96.2% spirit is tasted by Francois, and once it's approved, it leaves Picardy in the north where the wheat fields are. This is where everything's been done so far, and it travels down by road to Cognac. And Cognac is where we have our own well, which is where we've built, over our well, we've built our blending facility, where we blend the high-proof spirit with water. So it goes from 96.2% down to 40% ABV. In fact, do we have the animation in now?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks. So this is the whole process. Now, we use the blending and filtering happens both here in Jansac. The reason why we use this area is because underneath the ground in Cognac, you've got a very special type of limestone that goes underneath Jansac. And when it rains, the water filters at a very slow pace, about 1 meter per year through the limestone, until it ends up being about 500 feet, 150 meters. I always get the meter to feet thing wrong. Beneath the ground into an aquifer. And at this stage, it's passed from, us. I mean, if you think about it, 1 meter per year, by the time it gets down 150 meters, it's 150 years of filtering. And it changes the molecular makeup of the water, and it adds a certain essence to it. From here, we have our blending facility. We have our own dedicated well. The water is drawn up from the aquifer. It comes up and it goes first through a series of tests. If it's approved, it goes directly into this machine here, which is called a double reverse osmosis. So that answers your question. So the water is drawn up. It passes at a very, very high speed through these, which are it's called an active carbon cellular filter. And the spirit comes in from one side of the plate. It slowly passes through and it goes out. So it's just filtered once. And that just gives a little bit of a polish. They actually call it the polish filtering. It's the lightest way that you can filter. From here, it comes out and it enters into this tank, which is where it sits and rests. Or, in the case of our flavors, we will transport it to a different tank where our flavor is added, our natural flavor is added to the vodka. After this stage, it goes into a panel of 20 people that Francois has chosen, and it's tasted one final time. And it needs to be unanimously approved. If it's approved, it goes into our bottling line. Once it's on the bottling line, every single bottle is washed with just Grey Goose first. So the only thing that touches the inside of the bottle is Grey Goose. After the bottle's been washed out with Grey Goose, we fill the bottle with the vodka. And at that stage, the bottles are checked one final time, and then they go into case boxes and they're packed up and sent out here to lovely Rio de Janeiro, where hopefully you will all taste it. Any questions? Yes. Just wait one moment, she's coming.
If in the last time they taste the vodka is not approved, what do they do?
We sell it to other people. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. If it's a good question. If it's not approved at that stage, what will happen is every step of the way, we have checks. There are over 550 checks every day on Grey Goose, and it's like think of them like gates. If you go past this check, you can't go forward, and we have 550 of those. So if it doesn't make it through that final, we can look back and we can say what check did it not pass, and we'll know. Does that make sense? But that is very rare because, again, if you don't pass this test, you don't go on to the next stage. We stop and we say, what happened? Why is it not exactly? Why is it not where it needs to be? Another question? Yes, please. Hang on, just 1 second. Sorry.
John, quanto tempo esse lote demora para ficar pronto? Desde a moagem, tudo, até o processo dela ficar pronta.
It depends on a few factors. One is how hard the French people are working that day. No. In general, it's usually around 3 days. From the very beginning, from the grinding of the flour until bottling. But it depends on a few factors. It can be faster or less fast. But one thing is, everything we do, we want it to happen back to back, just like the grinding. So we try to speed, we want it to be fresh, and that whole process to be really fresh. Yeah. Yes.
Olá, uma pergunta pessoal. Após a fabricação e lançamento do produto.
There's 3 different bodies. It's okay. Oh no, here. Hold it. We've got a table down. Yes, and it has to pass legal requirements as well. And that's all beyond our hands. That happens outside of us. Okay, our translator is currently holding the table up. Not our translator, sorry, our microphone lady.
There's one here.
Okay, perfect. Yes.
Or English. I have a very commercial question.
Yes.
I will do a stupid comparison, okay? Forgive me.
No.
Herbalife have their fields in China.
Yes.
So they have global production in 30 countries.
Yes.
And I'm always thinking if everybody loves Grey Goose and wants to drink Grey Goose,
yes,
how can the Grey Goose maintain all this quality and this production with only 3 cooperatives, you know?
Yeah.
I cannot.
It's a really good question. It's a question I get asked a lot. And it's a very good question. And there's a few things. One, it's not easy, by the way. It's very difficult. We only have that distillery and only that bottling facility for everywhere in the world. And also, you might look, everything, the bottle, the cork, and the foil are all produced in France as well. Everything happens in France. But if we talk about, I think your question is almost, is there enough wheat in France to produce Grey Goose? Maybe, yes. And France is the 5th largest producer of wheat in the whole world. So it's a very large wheat producing country because they love their bread. And the wheat that we use to make Grey Goose makes up just 1/1000th of the region of Picardy, which is good because it means we're never going to run out. And the other fact that's quite interesting to know is 1 liter bottle of Grey Goose, it takes about the size of 1 square meter of wheat to make up. So if that gives you some idea of the size of Picardy. But it's, you know, cooperatives, there's 3 cooperatives, but the cooperatives are made up of sometimes, you know, dozens of small farmers getting together. And in and around the region, we're using those cooperatives because they're the most consistent producer of the wheat that we have and that we need. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
And we're very, very proud that we don't make Grey Goose anywhere but France, and we never will. In fact, we never will. The fact that we have the French flag on it, you know, that's a sign that everything, including the bottle, the foil, and the cork and everything, are all produced in France. You can't put that on there without the packaging and everything being produced in France too. So it's our sign of pride.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please, back on. This is good. These are more questions than I've gotten since Rio, you guys are thinking people. I like that. That's nothing against Sao Paulo, by the way. Sao Paulo too.
Essa região de conhaque, tanto como champanhe, ou seja, normalmente eles têm estudos de muito tempo, de muitos anos, né? Que foi fábricas de vinho que eles tinham um livro que era feito há 100, 200 anos atrás. Esse processo é totalmente novo ou ele se inspira em um outro processo anterior?
It's a very interesting question. I don't know how Francois would answer it, but he'd probably say this: he studied all of the old books, and he mastered the art of cognac making, and he still makes cognac today. But it's like I use my musical knowledge because I'm a musician. You need to study all the old classical music and all the scales and everything. But when you play jazz, let's say, you're not thinking about any of that. So I think he learned all of it so he could forget it. And a lot of this is very new ways of approaching distillation. But you have to know the foundation before you can do this.
It's like cocktails too.
Like cocktails too. Tony, great point. You know, you need to learn, you need to know an old-fashioned and a last word and a, you know, proper Singapore slang and every martini, and you need to learn all of that. But then when you go into a competition, you're creating something brand new. But you're doing it with the knowledge of what you've built on. Yes?
O François, vamos dizer, não é que eu quero, eu acho que ninguém quer isso aqui. Se ele morrer, acaba a vodka?
You have to pick the next maître de chai. And Francois' team is amazing. But if you'd like to apply, send me your CV. Okay? Any other question? Okay, so maybe we'll taste, just because I want you to taste the vodka while it's chilled, and then I'll come back for questions. Is that okay? Just 1 second. So, I've poured you Grey Goose. First off, do not freeze vodka, please. The reason is, when you freeze vodka, you start killing off some of the top aromas. So you can't taste as much. It's the same as if you taste a red wine that's been sitting in the fridge on accident. You don't taste anything because it's too cold. Vodka, when you freeze it, same thing. So vodka should be tasted at between 0 and 5 degrees centigrade. And interestingly, when you stir a martini, the temperature of the martini sits at 0 degrees centigrade usually. Maybe -1. And that's a great temperature for tasting neat spirits, I think, as well. Specifically a vodka, though. Because vodka is the most subtle flavored of all spirits. So you need to make sure that you taste it at the temperature that's right. Next, if you like to, you can take a little bit of water and just add a little bit of water in to taste as well. What that does is it changes the ABV of the vodka from 40% ABV to around 20%, which is where a martini or most shaken cocktails would be close to 20% ABV. Yes?
Referente até o que informou agora sobre o congelamento, né? É bem prático em todas as bebidas, né? Principalmente como já tem até uma história de um mestre cervejeiro.
I'm really sorry. I'm gonna wait for 1 second.
Oh, excuse me. Repeat, please.
I'm sorry. I know I just told you to put water in it, but this water has a note of it's got a lot of aroma to it. It's not bad. I think it's just maybe it's just my one. But it almost has like a chlorinated nose to it. Do you smell that?
O cloro dá aroma maravilhoso.
Okay. No, so if anyone did add water and you want to pour out your tasting, we'll pour you another taste. Apologies. Sometimes it has to do with the cleaning material that they use, the soaps. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's just mine too. I think it's just mine. It was just mine. Okay, you're all okay. You're safe.
Rio.
Someone was just trying to poison me.
Yes.
No, welcome to the...
Você está com cheirinho de cloro, tipo água de... Não.
Sim.
Ali? Então, quem tiver, levanta a mão, vira no copo de água de vocês, que aí a gente serve uma Grey Goose fresquinha pra vocês. Pessoal do Fasano, vocês ajudam a servir? Pra quem levantar a mão aí?
Sorry about that. I taste in Grey Goose. I don't know if any of these... Everybody's taste is very unique and different. So if you're not getting these, don't worry. And if you're getting other tastes, like chlorine, for instance, you can let me know too. Okay, I get a little bit of almond and vanilla, or almond and cream, almond milk. You know, like if you've ever tried. This I always get just at the very first aroma, which is anise, star anise, or licorice. Maybe a little, yeah, right? And a touch of lemon and citrus. And then the best way of tasting a vodka is take a little bit of it on your palate and breathe in, because what that does is it creates retronasal smell, which helps you taste a lot more of the spirit. So we can all do it together. And then you swallow, and you see the moment you swallow, the spirit comes back out, and that's where you really get a lot more of the flavor. It's a great way of tasting anything. Do you like it? This is a white flower, just white, general white flowers. White flour, apple, maybe a hint of green apple, crisp green apple, almond cream, star anise, and lemon. And the one thing you'll notice is we are kind of sweet. In fact, this is a nice thing to do too. You all have some bread in front of you. Take just, and I'll do it for you, my friend. Take a little bit of this baguette. Let's all break bread together. Okay, a little bit of the baguette in front of you. Okay? And this will help clear your palate too. And what you can do is take just a small bite of the bread. And that, it's very sweet. It's very lovely, isn't it? Just by itself, this is good bread. And once you've done that, once you've cleared your palate a little bit, try another small sip of Grey Goose. And see if you notice similarities. A bready, yeasty kind of quality. You know, that's different. If we were using potatoes, we would get a very different type of vodka. If we were using rye, you know, rye bread is very bitter. Rye vodka has a nice nutty kind of bitterness to it. It's all just different, and you need to, but it's important that you know what it is about you. Yes, there's a question, or no, they're just looking for, okay. Now we're gonna try some of our flavors, and in Brazil, we have 3 flavors, which are in front of you here. Maybe we'll start with the flavor all the way on your right, on the right-hand side. So on your right, start with this one here. Oh, come on, you guys are the best. Look at that. Look at how quickly they... add in a little bit of water if you want. And give it a swirl. By the way, you don't need to get your nose... You know, when you taste wine, I studied wine. When you taste wine, you gotta go, wow, you gotta get your nose in. Don't do that with vodka, because the aromas come to you. So you can just hold your nose like this, and you'll get a lot of the because the alcohol is much higher in vodka than wine, so that propels the aromas much faster. Exactly. You don't want to burn your nose. Grey Goose de citron. Okay, 2 things about our flavors. All of our flavors are made from real fruit. We only use real natural fruit. If you see vodkas with lots of flavors, they're not using real fruit, I guarantee you, because it's very expensive. What they're probably using is what's called nature identical flavoring. And you can put the word natural on a bottle if you're using nature identical. But it's different than using real fruit natural. Nature identical is where you take a molecule of a lemon, let's say, and a lemon molecule, the aroma of a lemon, will be carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, oxygen, carbon, all mixed together. And you can go into a laboratory and say, let me take 1 carbon, put it here, an oxygen here, a hydrogen here, and you can create a lemon molecule that's never seen a lemon. And that's nature identical flavoring. And if you want to know the difference between natural fruit flavoring, nature identical, try Grey Goose La Poire with another pear vodka. Because I think, and I could be wrong because there's lots of small vodkas, we're probably the only pear vodka made from the real pear, and I know of at least 2 or 3 others that are made from nature identical. And you can see the difference. And it doesn't mean one's better or worse, but it's good for you to see the difference, yeah? So we use Menton lemons. Menton is it's a city in the south of France. The lemons are massive. They're huge. In fact, they're prized in France. They have what they call the Fête du Citron every year, where they celebrate when they do the harvest. We wash and macerate the lemons for 3 weeks, at which stage they undergo what's called a vacuum distillation. And the distillation happens in a flavor house in the city of Grasse. Francois works hand in hand with flavor extraction experts whose job is to extract real fruit aromas or flavors that are able to be put back into Grey Goose. So he's a partner with these guys. In fact, he's one of the only people that goes and spends time after time and day after day with them to make sure that we get the right kind of profile. And we also use a second kind of lemon, which is from South America. In fact, either from Brazil or New Guinea, depending on the season, our other lemon. Because the Menton lemon is very floral and it's very particular. It almost has like a, you know when you smell like lemongrass or kaffir lime? It's very floral like that. So we round off the floral quality with the juicy, fresh lemons that we have here in South America. And both those lemons add to the overall kind of quality of Grey Goose de Citron. And if you want a very simple way of trying the citron out in a drink, try it in a Bloody Mary. It's amazing. Just take any vodka that you're using and instead try Grey Goose de Citron. It blows you away, blows your guest away. If your guest comes to the bar and he's like, Bloody Mary, next time you're like, I'm gonna show you something really cool. And it's very simple. Or I like drinking it on a beautiful beach like here. I would drink it with tonic and maybe a dash of cardamom, like cardamom bitters or fresh ground cardamom. Changes the way you think. Yes, question? Or no? Is that not a question? You just want a water? There is a question though. Okay.
Sobre o processo daí da vodka infusionada, saborizada, enfim, que você está falando. É um segredo da Grey Goose, a gente não tem os vídeos, né, para ficar acompanhando bem passo a passo mesmo. É um segredo mesmo de vocês ou não chega a ser necessário a partir da informação visual sobre essa parte saborizada da própria vodka?
It's more about time, actually. I have a very great film that explains our flavors that we just made, but we've only made it for 2 flavors so far. These films. One is for Cherry Noir, and the other is for Grey Goose Le Melon. And both of those are not available yet in Brazil. So I thought I'd just talk you through them. But we can email you the film, which explains kind of how we do all of our flavors, if you'd like. Anyone who wants that, we can send it to them. It's online too. There's a great film, but I can send it to you. But it's just, yeah, we've got a YouTube, Grey Goose YouTube. Every year they're consistent. The other thing is that the flavor houses they're genius people. In fact, that's why Francois works with them, because he says, look, my specialty is distillation of alcohol. Their specialty, and it's very complex, is harvesting natural aromas or flavors. And at that stage, it becomes molecular chemistry. And they've been making perfume in Grasse for 200 years. In fact, if you ever want to learn more about this flavoring process, there's a really great book called The Emperor of Scent. The Emperor of Scent. It's about a molecular biologist whose name is Luca Turin. And he studies perfume and grass for many years. And I never understood how amazing the extraction of real fruit aroma flavors is. And it touches everything you do. These are, you know, the soap everywhere, you know, the smell of soap, your toothpaste, spirits, cleaning products, detergents, anything with an aroma, and especially perfume, the aromas are made in probably just two places. One, grass. We mist them with water, and then the oil rises up from the orange peel to the top of the mixture, and then we skim off the oil and we vacuum distill that oil in the flavor house. And one thing I should have mentioned, le citron, l'orange, and le poire, all of our flavored vodkas have Grey Goose original as the base. So at the flavor house, we make this extraction of fruit, and then we add the flavor back into the vodka in Jansai at the area. So they're all not the same ratio flavor, but they're the same base. So they all have a similar mouthfeel. And then, if we want, we can try last but not least, all the way on your left, Grey Goose Le Poire. For Grey Goose Le Poire, we use a special type of pear called a Williams pear,